Story 1. My uncle convinced my grandmother to hand over her power of attorney to him, and then proceeded to sell her house and put her into a senior living home when she was only in her 50s. He left her there and then threw out most of her belongings and absconded with all of the family heirlooms from my great-grandfather, who was a famous artisan. In the intervening years, he pawned off most of the heirlooms as he continued to scam his way across the country. Last I heard, he had somehow swindled his way into being a judge in Montana. He tried calling my dad about a year ago, lying about what he had done to my grandmother. My dad called him out on that, and he hasn't tried contacting any of us since. Now that my sister and I are grown and earning comfortable wages, we have been slowly buying my great-grandfather's works as we see them appear for auction or online to bring them back into the family. A couple of years ago, we found one of my great-grandfather's pieces that my dad thought to be lost forever and surprised him with it for Christmas. I don't think I have ever seen him more overjoyed than he was that day. Story 2. I found out my uncle sexually assaulted my mom when she was a teenager. She kept quiet about it until recently, in her 50s. Turns out he also did the same to my aunt, who didn't mention it until my mom did. This was the same man I went to holiday dinners with, went on hikes with, hugged, and so on. She acted so normal around him that I had no idea. It is horrific how many people have similar stories. If this is happening to you, and the secret has not come out, please tell someone for your safety. Story 3. There were rumors when I was a child that a friend of mine was being molested by her stepfather. Adults were told, but nothing came of it, and she went through emancipation as soon as she was old enough. I later learned that the stepfather was abusing all of the children in the house, male and female, step and biological, 5 kids. What disgusts me the most is that, for the first time in my life, I talked to somebody about it and learned that many people in town knew it was happening. She and I were 11 years old. There was nothing either of us could do, but the adults should have helped those kids. Teachers knew. The principal of our school knew. I do not have all the details as to why they were not removed from the home, but there is no reason or excuse for all of them to have stayed in that place with that man for years. Story 4. This local kid was somewhat slow. My best friend, from 7th grade to adulthood, hung out with him when we were in elementary school. People used to tell him to do wild things, and he would do them. He and his sister lived in a foster home, and one day they disappeared around 6th grade. My best friend later told me his sister wore a diaper until she was 11, and the brother almost died from inhaling paint at 10. Some kids even dared them to perform sexual acts on each other. My friend was not there, but that was when he stopped hanging around them. 5 to 10 years later, his sister appeared on a television show about runaway prostitutes. 10 years after that, my best friend ran into him, and he said they were removed from the home for being molested by their foster family. His sister has been missing for more than 7 years, and he is living with the foster mother who molested him. It is a sad story. Story 5. My dad used to use crack cocaine and then film himself dressing up in women's clothes and doing his makeup poorly. That is not the disturbing part, though. The absurd and disturbing part is that when my mom found out about all that and other things, she found his hidden stash of dresses and gave them to me at age 12 or 13 as gifts. She told me to wear them right away and show Dad when he got home. So I was constantly parading around the house in my dad's dresses, not understanding why he was uncomfortable. Story 6. My family doctor between the ages of 15 and 23 was charged by several women for sexually assaulting them. He once performed a physical examination on me and made me remove my entire shirt and bra without providing a gown. I thought it was normal at the time. He also often touched my tattoos and asked what they meant. It is very creepy looking back on it. Story 7. My first babysitter, the next-door neighbor's child, attacked her mother with an axe. Her mother survived and shared this in her Christmas letter to friends and family years later. Story 8. My grandfather abused my father when he was about 8 years old. He told my mother about a year before he died, and she then told me. We were both shocked. He never gave any indication before. I knew my grandfather suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder from World War II, but this was surprising. He did not say if it happened once or repeatedly. Apparently, no one else knew except us. I do not know if his brother was aware. They were not very close. All these people have passed away now, so I will never know the full story. My father died in 1998 at the age of 57 from cirrhosis of the liver. Now that I have just turned 56, I realize how young that is. Story 9. My first boyfriend, whom I have known since kindergarten, became a Baptist preacher. A few months ago, he was arrested for performing sex acts on a 9-year-old girl. The news shocked me and made me feel very sick. Story 10. A man who regularly visited a gallery where I worked killed his wife and boiled her body parts. He is in prison now. Story 11. A man owned a moderately successful restaurant in my town. He was community-oriented, donated time and money, and was generally kind. However, there was something about him that always seemed off or insincere. He attempted to expand by purchasing a new restaurant but needed financial backing. After a disagreement with his backer, she went missing. During her absence, he cared for her son. It was later discovered that he had murdered her and buried her in a shallow grave behind a manufacturing building. This event deeply affected our town. Story 12. The child who lived next door to me grew up to be a child molester. He was my age when he lived next door, around 6 or 7, and used to come over and hang out in my backyard. At some point, he became intensely interested in seeing my genitals. He would repeatedly ask what mine looked like and ask to see it. He was all for, "You show me yours, and I'll show you mine." Even at 6, I thought this was strange and refused to compare. He and his family moved away a few years later. I never saw him again. Decades later, out of morbid curiosity, I searched his name and found his arrest and conviction record in another state. He had been a respected member of his professional community in a profession involving children. He and an associate would pay young teenage boys to perform with them on video in hotel rooms. They were arrested, and my childhood acquaintance spent some time in prison. Story 13. My great-grandfather stole money from an American school district in the 1940s and funneled it to the Nazis because he was part of the German-American Bund. When he was caught stealing, he shot himself at a golf course. They never recovered the money. Story 14. I had an uncle who went to prison for some time for allegedly trying to kill my aunt. Years later, after both my aunt and uncle had passed away, my cousin told me the real story. She had been molesting him for years when he was little, and when my uncle caught her, he flipped out and tried to kill her. During the confrontation, she cut off part of his hand and several fingers with a butcher knife. He went to prison. She got nothing. My cousin had an absolutely awful childhood. Story 15. I saw my grandfather only 2 times. Once when I was around 4 or 5, and then again when I was about 13 at my uncle's funeral. I asked my mother what the deal was, and she would just tell me he was not a good person. I stopped asking until a few years ago when she gave me the whole story. He was a vile, sadistic, evil person, abusive to his family in just about every way imaginable. Story 16. My ex told me he hurt and blackmailed many girls after we broke up and that it was my fault he did it. He also lied about his father dying so he could relate to me when I lost my dad at a young age, but his father lived just a block away from him. Story 17. My friend confided that she and her brother got drunk and had sex recently. I am friends with both of them. It is very awkward hanging out and pretending you do not know. Story 18. My former best friend, who I looked up to and considered a big brother figure, is in federal prison for 14 years for coercion and solicitation of a minor. He wanted to do unspeakable things with babies. I discovered this 3 years ago. Story 19. Not really a secret, but definitely a shocking discovery. There was a strange kid in my school who got expelled for inappropriate behavior in the library. He was always kind of odd, but he lived down the street and was always nice to me. I dated his sister briefly and would always say hi when I saw him because I honestly just felt bad for him. Fast forward about 10 years, my roommate and I were looking up people we went to school with on a public record site as a joke. I remembered the kid, and it turned out he was incarcerated for violently assaulting children. It was not funny after that point. I closed the site and never spoke of it again. Story 20. This guy in my friend group's older brother was into young girls. Even though he was in his early 20s, he routinely went after girls as young as 14. However, one time it ended very badly for him. He brought two 14-year-old girls to the sports complex where he worked late at night. They convinced him to let them tie him up on a flagpole so they could give him a show and then take advantage of him. They tied him up securely, pulled his pants down, took his car keys and left him there. Well deserved. Story 21. When I was around 8 or 9, I went over to my friend's house to play Nintendo. His older brother was there with one of his friends I had never met before. I think they were about 15 or 16. I just thought I was hanging out with some cool older kids. When I got home, my mom asked where I was and who I was with. I told her, and when I mentioned the name of the older brother's friend, he had a unique name. My mom became very alarmed. She knew him. When he was 12 or 13, he had assaulted one of her friend's sons who was 5. She was also friends with the nurse who treated the boy after the assault. Needless to say, she made me swear I would stay away from the new older kid. Word got around the neighborhood. I lived in a subsidized housing community where you had to have children to qualify to live there, so everyone was a parent and understandably freaked out about a known predator hanging around. My memory is hazy on the details, but as I understand, he was given a clear message not to come around anymore. I never saw him again. I went to high school with the boy who was assaulted. We had a few mutual friends. I tried to be friendly, but I could tell he was uncomfortable that I knew what had happened to him. I understood how he felt, kept my distance, and never told a soul. I hope he is doing well. Story 22. My childhood neighborhood friend grew up to be the Gone Girl kidnapper. He seemed like such a normal kid. Edit. Not the movie, the real-life kidnapping that was so bizarre no one believed the victims until Matthew was arrested for a similar crime. Story 23. My high school choir teacher was sexually abusing multiple female students. He was married with a pregnant wife and very involved in his Christian church. He gave me a ride, just the two of us. I was his new teacher's pet. One of his victims was his old teacher's pet. I think he was grooming me. I had no clue at the time. He was arrested a couple of months after that ride when a victim came forward after graduating. In prison, he started a men's choir and was suddenly saved by Jesus, despite being a Christian his entire life. Story 24. A Korean exchange student in my calculus class and tennis team was a nice person. A year below me. When I went to college the next year, he was arrested and jailed for raping his host family's young children. Story 25. Someone I went on 6 dates with and had incredible chemistry with suddenly said he got an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome diagnosis and couldn't handle dating. I learned it was because he was dating me only to get information and eventually contact information for my ex, who I had had a crush on for years. They hooked up on and off for a year before I learned he had gone through my Facebook one night, got all the information and reached out to my ex. Story 26. I found out my then boyfriend molested his sister and her friend when she was very young, around 5 or 6 years old. He is 7 years older than her. I walked out on him because it was too triggering. At first, he tried to play the victim and claimed he had apologized to his sister. Then he admitted that not only was it all true, but he had also lied about trying to make amends with his sister and had never apologized. He never went to therapy, attended a support group, or made any attempt to understand the root of what he did. Story 27. My high school coach was arrested for getting 2 minors from a different school, where he coached, drunk, and raping them. I found out because I happened to be watching the news one night. The most upsetting part was that my school did not inform anyone. When I tried to write a story about it for the school newspaper to raise awareness, it was vetoed. I am not sure if he was convicted or if he settled outside of court. Story 28. My ex accused me of cheating so many times that it finally drove me nuts enough to end it. I found out that she was cheating on me the entire time with multiple men, including a threesome with 2 men. She is blocked on everything but still tries to contact me any way she can. Story 29. I went to church for a long time, and there was a man whom everyone loved. He was somewhat overweight and had a silly sense of humor, but he seemed a little different because he had autism. One day, I was on a video platform, and a predator-catching video appeared. He was in it, and his shirt had a message about Jesus. I sent the video to the pastor, and the man was removed from the church. Now, I want to work in cybercrime to catch people like him. This happened when I was 16. He was always complimenting me and once asked if I was interested in modeling. Story 30. I had a really creepy manager at my first job. He would say the most inappropriate sexual things all the time. He always talked about liking Asian girls because they looked young and innocent and even seemed disappointed when I said I wasn't Asian. I eventually reported him, and he was transferred to a different store. I moved away for college shortly after, left that job, and tried to forget him. One day, I got a message from a coworker with a mugshot and arrest information for our old manager. He was locked up for abusing a toddler. I felt so much guilt for a long time, thinking if I had pushed it more, maybe he would have gotten in trouble sooner. Story 31. I learned from my supervisor accidentally giving me access to his Amazon account that his middle name is Matthew. Story 32. My girlfriend, now wife, had a roommate in college who was dating an older man. I went over and met him. Something felt wrong. I did some research and found out he was her band director in high school. He was fired for having a relationship with a student and was living just across the county line. Unbelievable. Story 33. I work in a small office with 2 other women. The other day, I walked into the restroom as one of my coworkers exited a stall. She turned on the faucet, briefly got her fingers wet, and walked out without washing her hands. I have worked with her for 16 years and just learned she does not wash her hands after using the restroom. It is things like this that make me avoid eating the office potluck. Gross. Story 34. An ex of mine had a drunk, violent father. It got so bad her mother finally wanted to split up when she was 2. Her father and a friend got drunk and beat her. Her grandfather tried to intervene and got knocked down. The friend fled because he thought the old man was dead. He wasn't. When his son-in-law's back was turned, he got up and stabbed him to death because he kept attacking her mother. Of course, it was ruled self-defense. When she was about 10, her mother got a new boyfriend with whom she had another girl. This was his princess, but he sexually abused my ex. Not by touching, but verbally and by forcing her to watch pornography with him all day while they were alone. I never believed he didn't touch her, but that's what she told me. It went on for years until her mother finally believed her and kicked the man out 5 or 6 years later. Her sister always blamed her for kicking out her beloved father. Only about 20 years later did she finally forgive her and then had her own issues with guilt. My ex never got over all that. She drank in college like a bottle of Jack Daniels a day and had 1 or 2 unhealthy affairs. She started to hate men with a passion and thought all loving fathers were just monsters with masks. But deep down, she wanted a normal life and family. She chose me and we really tried 3 months, but then she decided she wasn't ready after all. She was 29 by then. She knew me because I was actually friends with her sister, and we had the same cynical humor. She was gorgeous. I always felt like I failed her because I didn't try hard enough or made her uncomfortable somehow. The whole relationship was mainly texts and 1 or 2 evenings a week was all she could stomach. Then we drifted apart and only stayed Facebook friends. When she turned 40, she finally lost that long struggle with her demons and she took her own life. For all that time, I thought I failed her and felt guilty, debating whether to go to the funeral. Her sister invited me. I took my courage and went there, feeling like an outsider, as if I somehow had contributed to her losing. If only things had gone better. When I arrived, her sister and mother spotted me. There were easily 200 people there. They made a beeline for me and both hugged me and thanked me for being there. Her sister then and there told me she was so glad I came and that my ex would have been so happy to see me there. She had told her years later those 3 months with me were the happiest time she ever had in life. I cried for at least an hour before I had nothing left. She loved books and reading, and they made her a beautiful headstone in the form of an open book. Talk about catharsis. I wrote a letter to her mother and sister where I said they shouldn't be sad for her. They should be proud of her strength, fighting so many decades against demons that would have killed a weaker person much earlier. I think when she turned 40, she just thought the life she really wanted would never happen for her, and that's what made her give up. I wish I would have talked to her more, or she would have come to me, but I don't feel guilty anymore. She was headstrong, and if she had wanted to see me, she would have contacted me. I still had the same phone number and Facebook. Of course, I didn't find the whole story disgusting about her. I found the fathers who failed her disgusting. It's a warning to not take stuff like that lightly and how it can ruin someone's life forever. Story 35. My unpleasant uncle, who many find creepy and avoid, assaulted my aunt, his younger sister, when he was 16. She was probably 12 or 13 at the time. Apparently, my grandparents knew and ignored the situation. This uncle made me feel very uncomfortable my whole life. I always stayed away from him even before discovering his behavior. Now he is married to a preacher, pretending to be a good Christian living his best life. Story 36. Why my dad had trouble keeping jobs for longer than a few years at a time after he got out of the military service. He kept getting caught behaving inappropriately at the office. This is probably why he works from home now. Story 37. I found out that one of my closest relatives actually hates me. 25 years of being fake. Story 38. Caught my very religious Mormon dad snuggled up with a stripper in his lap at the club where I was working as a cocktail server. I exposed this to my siblings, who told our mother. In the fallout, it was revealed that it was not an isolated incident. 40 years of strip clubs, street corners, massage parlors, and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Story 39. Had sexual fantasies about animals and tried to convince me that it was normal. Story 40. Just read through all the comments. 90% are about pedophilia, and the rest concern cheating, murders, and a few benign topics. Story 41. One of my ex-boyfriends died in federal jail from COVID-19 while awaiting trial for 4 charges of crimes against children. He and his unusual wife had 8 children at the time, with 1 on the way. After he died in jail, her family tried to raise money to buy her a house through a crowdfunding platform. What a difficult situation. Story 42. There was a guy who was friends with people in my friend group. He was actually the older stepbrother of a guy in our group. For some reason, I never liked him. One time, at a party at a friend's place who had off-road trails on his property, many of us had purchased old Jeeps and trucks to leave there and use on the trails. He got drunk and was mad that many of us had vehicles to hit those trails. Probably because everyone partying there ended up driving our old vehicles on the trails, including all the girls who were about 8 years younger than him. He decided to take his Crown Victoria, his only vehicle, out on the trails when we got back. Everyone told him not to. He tried to get girls to ride with him, but everyone refused. We actually tried to take his keys, and he flipped out. He got in, sped down a trail, and rolled his car, saying he needed to go to work. He woke up the next morning freaking out at everyone. This was just the kind of short-sighted, reckless behavior he did trying to impress girls nearly a decade younger than him. I never liked the guy. It turned out he was a serial rapist targeting a local campus, with at least half a dozen victims coming forward. He waited in parking lots, broke into houses through windows, and sprayed victims with mace. It was all very disturbing. Now everyone just acts like he never existed. Story 43. My former close friend married a man who once babysat an infant and said to her, "See what it felt like." This man was often in contact with my daughters, and I only found out when his best friend tearfully contacted me to say it had been troubling him for the 20 years he knew about it. It is very upsetting. Story 44. 4 years, my mother lied about who my father was. She made up a fake name to deceive me. When I became an adult, I discovered that my mother hid my father's identity because he was attracted to men. To add to the complexity, after accepting and confirming my father's true identity, I later found out he was dating a male best friend of mine. What a small world we live in. Story 45. I found out after the fact that while we were together, my ex faked an entire relationship, including sex, kissing, snuggling, and saying, "I love you," with a female friend of hers just so she would have a place to live. She told me at the time that the friend was just doing her a favor. I was living with a roommate and was not financially stable enough to move or get an apartment with my ex. So this was her solution. She told this woman that things were not going well with me and that I was mistreating her. Apparently, this woman had feelings for her and believed everything my ex said. Story 46. There was a rumor at my high school that a staff member's father was arrested and imprisoned for raping young women. I searched that staff member's name, and his father's history appeared instantly. It was wild and sickening. No one at school liked him that much, but learning that information made me sad for him. Story 47. My uncle beat his wife and shoved a table leg up her. It is hard to look at a person the same way after hearing that, and being grouped with people like him is painful. When I found out my father threw a glass ashtray at my mother while she was holding me as a baby, and she had to turn around and take the blow to protect me. Finding out my other uncle was an informant. Finding out my aunt struggled with addiction. Finding out many people were afraid of me, even though I am terrified of everyone. The brother I thought was my full brother is not. And so on. Story 48. When my husband and I were dating, I had a good relationship with his brother. But as the years passed, I started having a strange feeling in my gut about him. We never let our kids go to his house or spend any time alone with him. It was a good thing we didn't because we later found out he had been molesting his stepson for many years. He only turned himself in after other children came forward with their own stories about him. Story 49. A coworker used to microwave fish every day for lunch. Turns out he did not even like fish. He just did it because he knew it annoyed everyone. The office villain we never saw coming. Story 50. I briefly dated a man who led a full double life, then a triple life. I thought you could only see this on television. Story 51. I am on disability in my country. A few years ago, my former disability caseworker appeared in the People You May Know section on Facebook. Against my better judgment, I looked at her profile. It contained racist content and posts expressing hatred toward disabled people. She wished harm upon disabled individuals and stated that they should be killed on the spot. There was a lot of racism directed at virtually everyone, including pictures of her in blackface. I reported her, but nothing happened. As far as I know, she still works at the disability office. Story 52. I worked with a woman for years and knew her fairly well. Later, I found out that she and her husband were the leaders of the local social group. My only problem was that she never invited me. Story 53. Met my biological mother when I was 16. I had been separated from her permanently as a toddler, but when I met her, she seemed very sweet. After knowing her for a while, she would tell me stories about her past, including parts about me as a baby. However, she would leave me alone for days with her addict boyfriends and would laugh while telling me these stories, joking about how I was upset when she came back. I have struggled with mental health issues my entire life, and I suspect her immature actions played a part in this. Story 54. My uncle's brother-in-law and father-in-law abducted, raped, and murdered a young woman in the early 1980s and dumped her in the desert. The brother-in-law took the fall for the entire crime, while the father-in-law never served any time. We used to have birthdays and holidays at my grandparents' house, and the father-in-law was never allowed inside or at family functions. I never understood why until I became much older and was told about the situation. My uncle eventually divorced his wife, and we have not seen or heard from his ex-wife's family since. Story 55. My ex-best friend admitted she was cheating on her boyfriend of 6 years with a random guy she thought was way better looking and better in bed. Her words. I told her I would not keep her secret and that she needed to stop fooling around with her boyfriend and tell him the truth. This led to a lot of drama, her boyfriend finding out, them breaking up, and her dating the guy she was cheating with for a year, until she broke up with him because he cheated on her. Then she went back to her boyfriend. Yes, the one she cheated on took her back. From what I hear from friends who still talk to them, they made me the villain in this story because I threatened to report her, and apparently that was emotionally manipulative. Ridiculous. Story 56. My cousin realized through therapy that he had been molested multiple times by his father. It happened when he was so young that he suppressed the memory. When he finally remembered in his 40s, he confronted his dad. His father denied it at first, then finally admitted the truth but did not apologize. My cousin's mother is taking her husband's side and basically believes he did nothing wrong. This is absolutely disgusting. They have been completely cut out of the entire family. Story 57. My grandfather used to mentor children and teenagers in a Big Brother type of program. One of the teenagers ended up abusing my father, but my grandfather did not believe him until he walked in on them. Even then, he never got the teenager in trouble. He just stopped seeing him. Story 58. A man whom I knew when he was 6 years old was convicted, along with his wife, of producing child pornography with their own daughter. Story 59. My brother-in-law molested my niece. My sister still does not believe my niece. Story 60. A woman in her late 30s to early 40s, whom we worked with, saved all of her used menstrual products in paper bags. Literal years of pads and other items were stacked to the ceiling in the shower stall of a bathroom in her house. Story 61. A guy I went to junior high with was always one of the girls, and used to braid hair and stuff in class. Later, I found out he used to steal their hair ties whenever hair got tangled in them and wear them as a ring while he masturbated. Story 62. My cousin had inappropriate relations with her dog and sold a video of it online. We got drunk once, and in her intoxicated state, she told me about it. She never told anyone else. Story 63. We found out that the principal and pastor of the megachurch and Christian school was arrested for taking phones from people and uploading inappropriate pictures to his own phone. It is unclear if these were photos of adults or students, but the situation was serious enough to involve the police. There are not many details available, but it was reported in the local news. Story 64. I found out that our security guard at our residential complex was in jail for 6 years for battering and killing his wife and child. The person who hired him has the attitude that he did his time. Did he really? Story 65. One of my cousins said he desired me sexually. He also has gray hair and I am in my 30s. I was in my early 30s when he confessed this. The worst part is I found out he did this to another cousin, but he appears safe to others. I was scared to visit that side of the family for a while. Story 66. A guy I used to party with in high school turned out to be a pedophile. He was such a laid-back and handsome guy and had no problem getting girlfriends. He ended up on the run from the law, which is how we all found out. I am not sure how he got caught. Either way, I hope he serves the worst and longest sentence possible. Story 67. Back in college, I had a roommate who seemed pretty normal at first. Quiet, kept to himself, and always had his headphones in. But after living with him for a few months, I started noticing some strange things. First, there was an odd smell that would occasionally come from his side of the room, but I just figured it was old food or something. I didn't think much of it until one day, I came back early from class and caught him red-handed. This person was in the middle of urinating in a plastic bottle. I'm not talking about being in a rush or doing it one time as an emergency. No, he had dozens of these bottles, full, lined up under his bed like it was some twisted collection. Some of them were even capped and dated, like he was keeping track of his urine like it was fine wine. I was disgusted. I asked him why he didn't just use the bathroom that was literally 10 feet away from our room, and he said that he was too lazy to walk to the bathroom sometimes. Too lazy. So instead of getting up and taking 10 steps to the bathroom, he preferred to urinate in bottles and store them under his bed like some kind of hoarder. The worst part? He didn't even seem ashamed. He acted like it was completely normal, like I was the weird one for being grossed out. Needless to say, I moved out not long after. I couldn't look at him or those bottles the same way again. Story 68. The number of stories about sex offenders in this thread is repugnant. Story 69. When I was 9 months old, my father went to a house to help his friend recover something that was stolen. When he arrived at the trailer, a fight broke out between my father and the other men. Someone approached him from behind and shot him in the head. He was only 30 years old. No one was ever arrested. The case remains cold. Story 70. In high school, I was friends with a guy who often talked about his twin sister. One day, he confessed to me that he and his twin sister had lost their virginities with each other and regularly had sex. I asked my older sister what to do because I was freaked out, but she told me to mind my own business. Fortunately, he was careless with his words, and someone else reported him. He and his sister were separated. I met his father once when I was driving a group of us teens. I was 17 at that time and the only one with a car. His father kept trying to give me beer and shots, but I refused. His uncle was kissing a 16-year-old girl we had with us. She was drunk. I made her leave with me and took her home along with the boys. They were behaving inappropriately too, so I put her in the front seat next to me where I could watch her. I was very uncomfortable. We both joined the military to afford college, but in different branches. He was discharged and diagnosed with schizophrenia. His father died of kidney failure related to alcoholism. It was a difficult experience growing up in a low socioeconomic status. Story 71. A friend of a friend who once tried to rent a room to me actually stabbed his girlfriend to death in a failed double suicide pact. When she backed out, he stabbed her and then decided he did not have the courage to stab himself. It happened in a city park that my friends and I used to frequent. He went to prison, and we have never heard anything about him since. Story 72. There was a coach on one of my high school teams who I had a big crush on. He was really nice to me and complimented my playing and many other things. I ended up leaving the team after a few months because I switched schools. I didn't think much about him after that, although sometimes I laughed at myself for having such a big crush on him, but also thought about how nice and cute he had been. Just a few months ago, about 5 years after I was on the team, I reconnected with one of the girls from the team and found out he had been arrested and convicted of sexually harassing and grooming many of the girls, even assaulting one of them. I was horrified, and looking back, I realized I had been groomed. I was very lucky to have left the team when I did, or I would have been another one of his victims. Story 73. I found out there is child sexual abuse material of me out there, and then learned my mother knew about the abuse and did nothing, did not get me therapy, just did nothing. She does not know I know. But my sister and I mentioned something about the house I was abused and being on the news for being a house of horrors, and my mother turned around aggressively and screamed, "Are you implying you were abused? Well, you were the one who kept asking to go there." I was 5 to 11 years old. So gross. Story 74. Not disgusting but scary. My maternal grandmother's brother was an assassin. He was also assassinated. Story 75. In 2022, my father took his own life. He left no note for his wife, who has been my stepmother for over 16 years, the children, family, or anyone else. However, he did leave a note for his already deceased dog that simply said, "See you soon," along with a list of bills for my stepmother to pay. He advised her to file for bankruptcy because he had accumulated 2 hidden credit cards with about $90,000 of debt. We later found out he spent the money on OnlyFans and prostitutes, which I didn't even know could be paid for that way. I did not attend the funeral or collect his ashes. There was no point. Story 76. The girl I had a crush on for ages became newly single. We hit it off after years, and she agreed to have dinner with me. We went to Chili's, and while she was eating the southern egg rolls, she casually told me that she left her ex because her son, age 5, was no longer entertaining her. When I asked her to explain, she admitted to sexually abusing her boyfriend's 5-year-old son and filming it for years. The date ended abruptly. I pretended to get an important text from my mom, telling me to help her out with something, and left. I called a friend to ask how to approach this situation. I went to the police, but they told me to leave. Without legally obtained proof, there was nothing they could do. When I tried to record her admitting it on audio, she refused to share any details about her actions because she thought I had left and was shaming her. She never clearly admitted what she had told me the previous day, so I have no way to get this investigated further by any official authority. Story 77. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My parents have been divorced since I was born, and I lived with my father when I was a teenager. He was relatively well off and always at work, working long hours in the entertainment industry. I was a latchkey kid, and it wasn't uncommon for him to be gone for a week at a time, leaving me home alone when I was 15. He is a huge gun enthusiast. He owns upwards of 1,000 guns, some of which he built. I grew up around every type of firearm imaginable. AKs, ARs, machine guns, shotguns, handguns, sniper rifles. He even had grenades, and I don't know how he got those. There were huge storage bins full of different types of ammunition and some silencers. He was never in the military and is strongly anti-police to the extent that when crimes occurred, like his car being broken into several times, his tires slashed, or our home being broken into, he never once called the police. He snatched my phone out of my hands when I tried to call the police during a home break-in. I was young, so I didn't think much of it then. We went shooting whenever he was around, which was not often, but that's part of why I am familiar with his extensive firearm collection. A couple of years later, some strange things started happening. He left the house one day when I was not home, and I came home to find all the doors open and the lights on. One gun safe was wide open, with only the sniper rifles missing. The next morning, I asked him why the front door and gun safe were open and why he had been gone. He dismissed it, saying he was just showing a neighbor his rifle. I accepted the explanation. One morning, I went with him to get coffee and donuts. He went inside to get everything, leaving me in the car. I got bored and noticed a duffel bag I had never seen before on the floor in the back seat. I unzipped it just enough to look inside and found zip ties, duct tape, a Bowie, knife, and bloody clothes. I freaked out, zipped it back up, and acted like I didn't see it. It weighed on me all day, but my dad acted completely relaxed while we had our coffee and donuts. I was 16 and unsure if I was witnessing some strange sexual activity or something worse. The next day, I confronted him over coffee and donuts. He casually pulled a sniper veil out of his pocket and put it on the table. He asked if I knew what it was. I said no. He told me it was a sniper veil and that he kills people for a living. That was not his exact wording, but that was the message. He said that was why he randomly disappeared on weekends, why he owned specific guns, and why he had a ghillie suit. I want to clarify that he is not a hunter and reminded me he does not hunt animals, only people. He said all this nonchalantly, sipped his coffee, finished his donut, and left for work. I will never forget that day. I told my boyfriend at the time, and shortly after this revelation, I moved out of my father's home before I turned 18. He didn't care. I ended up leaving the state and cutting contact with him. This was over 15 years ago, so I have had a lot of time to think about it. He is now dying of cancer, and I wonder if he actually kills people. I have nightmares about him killing people and wake up stressed and worried that I could be the missing piece in solving some deaths. He has never been arrested. He has a clean record, and I don't know if he is on anyone's radar. If what he said is true, I don't know what to think. I listen to a lot of true crime, so my mind reels, and I have a hard time processing it. I told my family, but they don't believe me. My mother thinks it is a joke and says he is role-playing and trying to seem cool. My siblings think I made up the story about our father to be dramatic and have an excuse to run away from home, as if leaving home is easy when you are young, have nothing to your name, and little to no help. I literally graduated early so I could move, cut off contact with my family at 17, and start a new life in a new state. I don't know if he actually murders people for hire like he suggested or if he is hurting women, which is a later thought I had since the duffel bag incident initially made me think of BDSM. But I have no clue. I don't know what to do with this information, and his cancer diagnosis has brought it all up again. What happens if he has murdered people and then dies without justice being served? I will feel responsible if I don't help somehow. But how do I help if I don't know what is true and who he has allegedly killed? Seriously keeps me up at night. He is very well liked at his day job and in the entertainment industry, where he has worked since before I was born. He has friends, girlfriends, and family who love having him around because he is sober, smart, and well-traveled, with many stories and lots of knowledge. I can't stand being around him. I feel nothing when he hugs me, and though it's been years, I am at a loss about what to do with what I know or why he even told me in the first place. I have theories, but I don't know. I feel disgusted regardless. Story 78. The person who molested, abused, and raped my ex for over a year during our 2.5-year relationship was nothing but her imagination. She lies to everybody about everything all the time. Story 79. She sexually assaulted my friend, sexually assaulted my male friend, and called me racial slurs. She also cheated on someone with a man 22 years older than her and her ex-boyfriend. Story 80. When my friend Matthew has to urinate in the middle of the night, he uses his bathroom sink instead of the toilet. He also admitted to not regularly cleaning his bathroom sink. Story 81. I used to work at fairs for my uncle, who is a great man. The Pepsi representative used to take my sister and me, who were 11 and 12 at the time, for tours of the fairgrounds. The Pepsi representative would ask us all kinds of inappropriate questions and asked if we wanted to leave the fairgrounds with him. We finally told my uncle, and although the Pepsi representative did not die, I am pretty sure my uncle threatened him and I never saw him again. Story 82. Posted elsewhere a few years ago, disgusting in that he was what we thought was a devout Christian. When my grandfather died, a whole other family arrived at his funeral from interstate. They did not know about us and we did not know about them. My uncle and his new half-brother looked like twins. The crazy thing was that we all got along so well that we went out to lunch afterwards. My grandmother died a few weeks before him and we do not think that she ever knew. Story 83. Not disgusting, but at the time it frightened me because it was the first time an adult had to explain a very serious concept to me. In 4th grade, there was a kid in my class who was a little strange. He always took a liking to me and I was polite, but we were not really friends. One day, he walked up to me in the middle of recess and said, "My grandfather has been harming me." I did not know what to say or what that meant. What I did know was that I needed to tell an adult, so I did. Of course, parents and law enforcement got involved. His grandfather was his main caregiver. We would see him at school drop-off and pick-up daily. He died of a heart attack shortly after he was exposed. I still wonder how that kid is doing today and hope he healed and is living a normal life. Story 84. Not so disgusting, really. Judge for yourself. When I was a teenager, my father told me once about how he was complicit in the euthanasia of his own father. His father was living and dying in their poor working-class home in London, suffering from incurable cancer back in the 1960s. He screamed in pain all through the night. His doctor used to come around every evening to give him a shot of morphine. My dad was in the habit of helping by holding down his father's arm and was familiar with the dosage. He said that one night, when his father was really bad, he was helping out the doctor and noticed that the doctor prepared a far larger dose than normal. His words to me were close to, "Then our eyes met over his body, and in that silent moment a question was asked and an answer was given, all without words. The doctor inserted the needle, pushed the plunger, and my grandfather died soon afterward of a massive morphine overdose. My dad was not a liar and was a very decent man." Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.